Why do we feel a strange sense of longing when we look at the moon? It's just a rock, isn't it? A giant, cratered sphere of ancient dust, hanging silently in the sky, cold, distant, lifeless, and yet, it feels like something more. It feels familiar, as if it's been with us, watching, waiting, since the very beginning. Imagine this: archival footage flickers to life. An astronaut floats weightless in black space, tethered by hope and engineering. A child stands on a rooftop, eyes wide, staring into the night. A heartbeat echoes softly in the background, syncing with a time-lapse of the moon cycling through its phases. New, crescent, full, waning. We hear a quiet voice. Asterisk. What if that feeling isn't just poetry, but biology? Asterisk, because something strange has been noticed by scientists. Something subtle and yet profound. Across cultures, across continents, even among people who have been blind since birth, there is a consistent emotional response to the moon. Not just awe, not just wonder, but a feeling, a tug in the chest, a sense of connection, even if we can't explain it. Is that just coincidence, or could it mean something more? This isn't just about myth or metaphor. This is about a biological echo, something woven so deeply into our evolutionary story that it lingers in us still. Could the moon be part of our memory, not just as a symbol that shaped our myths, but as a participant that shaped our biology? Could the moon have helped make us who we are? That is the question, and the journey to answer it begins with a single glance upward. For something so distant, the moon has an intimate grip on our lives. It exerts no warmth, speaks no words, and yet its influence is everywhere. Begin with the tides. The moon's gravitational pull stirs the oceans, dragging billions of tons of water across the globe in a rhythmic, predictable dance. These tidal cycles don't just shape coastlines, they shape life. Along these shifting shores, ecosystems pulse in time with the moon. It's in these brackish in-between worlds, where salt and fresh water mix, that some scientists believe the first creatures took tentative steps from sea to land. Life didn't simply evolve with the moon, it evolved through it. The tug of its gravity, steady and relentless, may have sculpted the very conditions for life to crawl forward. But the moon does more than stir oceans. It holds the planet steady. Without it, Earth's axial tilt, the angle that gives us our seasons, would wobble wildly over millennia, leading to violent climate swings that could have made long-term evolution impossible. With the moon, we got a kind of planetary anchor, a cosmic stabilizer. Because of that balance, Earth had time to evolve, forests, mammals, consciousness. The moon's quiet orbit helped make Earth hospitable, and kept it that way. Even now, biology listens to the moon. We know of circadian rhythms, the daily cycles ruled by sunlight, but many creatures follow longer, lunar-based patterns. Circadian rhythms govern the spawning of corals, the migrations of sea turtles, even the reproductive cycles of some fish. And yes, in humans too, faint echoes remain. Studies suggest that menstruation may have once been synchronized with the moon's phases. Some researchers even propose that our hormonal fluctuations still bear traces of lunar influence, ancient cycles hiding inside modern biology. The moon isn't just up there, it's in us, in our blood, in our clocks, in the cellular tides of who we are. And what about the rhythms of culture? Long before we measured time in hours and minutes, we watched the moon. Its phases were the first calendar, a natural cycle of waxing and waning light, visible to all, shared by entire communities. Nearly every ancient civilization built there rituals around it. Ramadan, Easter, Hanukkah, Chinese New Year, all lunar tide. Mayan farmers used moon phases to decide when to plant. Shamans used it to guide vision quests. The moon told us when to fast, when to feast, when to mourn. In a time before clocks, the moon helped us synchronize, not just with nature, but with each other. Is it possible that the moon didn't just influence our biology, but our behavior? That it helped align not just tides and hormones, but human hearts? Today, we like to think we've moved beyond such things. We sleep under electric lights, we schedule with digital calendars, and yet the moon persists. Recent research reveals something surprising. Even in remote villages, with no electricity, and even in controlled lab settings, human sleep changes slightly during full moons. We tend to fall asleep later, sleep more lightly, sometimes dream more vividly. This pattern shows up across different cultures and environments. It's subtle, but consistent. Why? There's no obvious benefit, but evolution rarely does anything without reason. Why would we, as a species, stay more alert during the brightest lunar nights? Was it for safety, for hunting, for ritual? Could it be that somewhere deep in our biology, the moon still calls? There may be more than instinct at work here. Enter the idea of epigenetic inheritance, the notion that emotional experiences, especially repeated across generations, can leave biological marks, not in the DNA sequence itself, but in the way genes are expressed. Trauma, stress, even patterns of behavior, all can echo forward, shaping descendants. If this is true, then what about wonder? What about awe? What about the repeated emotional imprint of moonlit rituals, of stories told under lunar skies, of migrations, births, and losses marked by its glow? Could those ancient experiences be encoded into us, subtly passed down, generation after generation? Perhaps the longing we feel when we look at the moon isn't just poetic. Perhaps it's an ancestral memory, a biological whisper from those who looked up before us. Not superstition, not metaphor, but inheritance. At first glance, it might seem like a simple trick of the eyes, the well-known moon illusion. When the moon hangs low on the horizon, it looks enormous, almost impossibly close, as if it's leaning in toward Earth. Scientists have long attributed this to an optical quirk. The human brain compares the moon to foreground objects like trees or buildings, making it appear larger. But the illusion does more than fool our vision. It stirs something deeper, a strange, spine-tingling awe. People often describe feeling hushed, reflective, or even moved to tears. That's not just poetry, it's neuroscience. Recently, brain imaging studies have begun to peel back the layers of this mystery. When people gaze at the moon, especially during full phases, there's activation in a curious place, the default mode network. This is the brain's inward-facing system, the part that lights up during daydreaming, reflection, memory, recall, and self-awareness. It's where identity lives, where we sift through our past and imagine the future. In other words, the moon doesn't just light up the sky, it lights up you. This reaction suggests that the emotional pull we feel isn't just visual, it's existential. The moon might be triggering neural circuits tied to meaning itself, and the deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. Back in the 1970s, long before fMRI machines and wearable sleep trackers, a curious group of researchers tried something bold. They wanted to know, could humans sense the moon even when they couldn't see it? In a small experiment, participants were isolated from visual cues and artificial light for weeks. Researchers tracked mood, sleep, and subtle physiological changes as the moon cycled overhead. The results were confusing. Some patterns emerged, but the data was messy. No one knew what to make of it. The study was shelved, forgotten, but today, with new tools, that question has resurfaced, and the answers are quietly revolutionary. Multiple studies now show that human neurochemistry shifts with the moon's phases, even when people are shielded from direct moonlight. Levels of serotonin, the neurotransmitter tied to mood and well-being, appear to fluctuate in sync with the lunar cycle. Melatonin, which governs our sleep-wake rhythms, also shows regulation patterns tied to full and new moons. These effects persist in dark rooms, underground labs, urban apartments with blackout curtains. Visibility doesn't seem to matter. Something in the body is keeping time with the moon. And then comes the chilling twist. Hospitals have noticed something odd, something they've whispered about for decades, but only recently begun to quantify. Emergency rooms report subtle but consistent spikes in psychiatric admissions around full moons, increases in panic attacks, mood swings, insomnia, suicidal ideation, not in rural folklore-driven areas, but in dense urban environments, where moonlight barely reaches through the haze of city life. Controlled studies in psychiatric wards and emergency departments show statistical upticks in emotional crises during lunar peaks. The pattern has been dismissed for years as myth. Lunacy, after all, is just an old superstition, right? But what if it's not? What if this isn't myth, but memory? A biological reflex echoing from a time when moonlight meant something urgent: danger, birth, transformation. What if, buried deep beneath rational thought, lies an ancient code still tuned to the moon's invisible rhythms? The dilemma is no longer just scientific, it's philosophical. If the moon can stir our sleep, our chemistry, our emotions, then how much of what we feel is truly ours? And how much is a whisper from something older than memory itself? As the questions deepen, a larger truth begins to emerge, one that reshapes not just our understanding of the moon, but of ourselves. The moon has never been a passive object in the sky. It is not simply a background character in Earth's drama. It is, in a very real sense, a co-author of our history. Without the moon, the Earth would spin wildly, its axis tilting unpredictably over millennia. Seasons would lurch between extremes. Climate patterns would shatter. Without the moon's stabilizing gravity, complex life may never have evolved at all. Early Earth would have had days only 4 or 5 hours long, a world of frantic rotation and violent storms. It was the moon, locked in its slow gravitational dance with Earth, that slowed the planet's spin, shaped the tides, and offered enough stability for ecosystems to build, layer upon layer, into forests, oceans, sentience. This isn't just astronomy, it's autobiography. Our ancestors lived by the moon, not metaphorically, but biologically. For millennia, long before electricity or even firelight, moonlight was the only guide in the dark. Predators hunted by night, and so did we. The full moon allowed for migration, gathering, ritual. It dictated safety, strategy, survival. Over generations, could we have evolved not only to respond to the moon's light, but to feel it? Could our emotional rhythms have begun to sync with its cycle, not as superstition, but as adaptation? There is growing evidence to suggest that the moon's phases shaped more than our calendars. They may have shaped our brains, but now, in the modern world, that ancient rhythm is being drowned. Artificial light blazes through the night. Urban glow masks the moonlight entirely in many cities. Neon replaces nightfall, and screen time replaces starlight. Our bodies, once so attuned to the Earth-Moon relationship, now follow the rigid ticking of digital clocks and work schedules. And the cost? It may be deeper than we think. The rise in sleep disorders, the spike in anxiety and depression, hormonal imbalances, menstrual irregularities, circadian dysfunction. Could some of this be the echo of a severed connection, a mismatch between the biology we inherited and the environment we've created? A kind of lunar jet lag, not across space, but across time, and beneath it all lies a more philosophical ache, a longing not just for nature, but for belonging. Across countless indigenous cultures, the moon is not a rock or an object, it is a relative. The Inuit call her Makan, a protective presence. Many Native American tribes speak of the moon as grandmother, a guiding, watching force. Aboriginal Australians have lunar myths that mirror astronomical truths scientists only recently confirmed. These aren't primitive metaphors. They may be reflections of something real, a bond that runs deeper than language, a bond forged not by belief, but by biology and story, carried in ritual, passed through generations. What if our ancestors weren't anthropomorphizing the moon, but remembering her? This is where the conflict sharpens, not between science and myth, but between modern disconnection and ancient coherence. If the moon helps shape us, regulate us, inspire us, what happens when we forget her? What do we lose, biologically, emotionally, spiritually, when we look up at a blank sky and feel nothing? Or perhaps, more urgently, what is it trying to remind us of, even now? And then comes the moment that changes everything, not with a bang, but with a quiet unfolding, like moonlight revealing the shape of a landscape hidden in darkness. For centuries, we've looked at the moon as something outside of us, a celestial body, a distant object. But science, step by step, is pulling us toward a startling realization. The moon is not just in the sky, it's in us, our biological rhythms, from the monthly cycles of reproduction to the nightly patterns of sleep, bear the fingerprints of lunar time. The average menstrual cycle in humans, around 29.5 days, mirrors the moon's phases almost exactly. Some researchers suggest this isn't coincidence, but a biological resonance, a leftover signal from when our ancestors lived in sync with the night sky. But it goes even deeper. Studies have found that coral reefs, thousands of miles apart, spawn in perfect coordination with the full moon. Deep-sea creatures, who never see daylight, still follow lunar cycles. Even bacteria, single-celled organisms without brains or clocks, show biochemical shifts that align with lunar patterns. If the moon can influence coral and microbes, what might it be doing in humans? The answer is unfolding inside the very machinery of life. At the cellular level, humans, like all animals, possess intricate timekeeping systems, molecular oscillators made of genes and proteins that loop in cycles, regulating everything from metabolism to mood. These systems, often tied to the 24-hour solar day, also show subtle but persistent modulations across the 29.5-day lunar month. Scientists are now beginning to uncover clock genes that respond not just to light, but to the kind of cyclical light that only the moon can provide. The implication is staggering. The moon may be woven into our cells, imprinted into our evolutionary firmware, regulating tiny processes we're only beginning to understand. The moon doesn't just orbit the Earth, it resonates through us, like a drumbeat in the dark, like a lullaby older than language. Its rhythm pulses not just in tides and forests, but in blood, in breath, in memory. It is part of our internal clockwork, a component of the same machinery that makes us sleep, dream, heal, feel, and hear. In this revelation lies something more than science, a philosophical shift. For so long, we've imagined ourselves as detached observers floating above nature, watching the cosmos from a distance. But maybe we were never outside of it at all. Maybe we're not separate from the moon, or the earth, or the tides. Maybe we're participants, kin, carried by rhythms we didn't invent, only inherited. The moon is not foreign. It is family, a silent ancestor circling above us, guiding not just the ocean's waves, but the invisible ones within us. This isn't about mythology or mysticism. It's about remembering what our bodies already know, that we are not alone. Beneath the sky, we are of it. Moonlit creatures in a moonlit world. In the quiet light of modern science, the pieces begin to fall into place. What once seemed like folklore or poetic fancy is now being confirmed by data, imaging, and molecular biology. The field of chronobiology, the study of biological rhythms, has uncovered overwhelming evidence that lunar cycles affect a vast range of life on Earth, from the coordinated spawning of coral reefs to the nocturnal migrations of birds, to the sleep patterns of mammals and subtle shifts in human mood. The moon's influence is no longer speculative, it's measurable. It's written into the biological clocks of the planet itself. In parallel, the field of neuroendocrinology is revealing how moonlight may have sculpted the hormone cycles of our ancestors, especially in females. Estrogen and melatonin, two hormones critical for reproduction and sleep, show regulatory patterns that appear to be shaped, in part, by the lunar cycle. This influence isn't direct light alone, it's a legacy of millennia spent evolving under a sky that waxed and waned. Moonlight once governed not just when to sleep or wake, but when to conceive, when to gather, when to heal. Now, traces of that lunar regulation remain embedded in the scaffolding of our neurochemistry. Even in the most modern frontier space, the moon is being reconsidered, not just as a destination, but as a physiological partner. NASA and other space agencies are actively studying how the moon's gravity, radiation, and light patterns affect human biology. As we prepare for long-term habitation beyond Earth, understanding how our bodies respond to lunar rhythms is no longer optional, it's critical. Future lunar missions will not just plant flags or build bases. They will explore how to live in resonance with a body we've always known, but never truly understood. But perhaps the most profound implication isn't technical, it's personal. As the modern world accelerates, brighter, faster, louder, we've become disoriented, chronically out of sync with nature's ancient rhythms. Sleep disorders, hormonal imbalances, rising rates of anxiety and depression. These aren't just signs of psychological stress. They may be symptoms of disconnection, of a biology evolved to track the sky, now trapped beneath artificial ceilings. Yet the solution might be simpler than we think. Reconnecting with lunar rhythms, dimming lights during full moons, aligning rest cycles with lunar phases, acknowledging our natural oscillations instead of overriding them, could become part of future therapies. Some researchers are already exploring lunar-aligned treatment schedules for conditions like bipolar disorder, which often follows a cyclical, moon-like pattern. Others see potential for regulating PTSD, insomnia, and menstrual health by integrating lunar cues into medical design. And still, beyond the science, something even deeper stirs. For thousands of years, humans have looked at the moon not just with eyes, but with meaning. We wrote songs to it, we prayed beneath it, we used it to guide birth, death, and transformation. And now, science is telling us, we were right to feel what we felt. The moon is not just a symbol, it's a biological signal, a cosmic tether, an old, quiet companion encoded into our tissues. To acknowledge this is to remember a truth we've long forgotten, that home is not just Earth, it's Earth and moon, spinning together in a shared rhythm, a shared story. The moon, it turns out, is not a distant light in the dark. It's a reminder, shining down on us still, that we belong to a much larger rhythm, one that begins in the stars, echoes in the ocean, and pulses ever so faintly in our blood, somewhere in your cells. The moon is still singing, not in words, but in rhythms. The subtle rise and fall of hormones, the shifting patterns of sleep, the quiet timing of your breath. There's an echo of tides in your blood, a memory of moonlight filtering through ancient forests, a faint biological pulse, tuned not just to the rotation of the Earth, but to the orbit of that silent, glowing companion in the sky. You may not feel it consciously, but it's there in the way your body softens at night, in the dreams that arrive more vividly beneath a full moon, in the strange stillness that settles when silver light spills across the world. It is the language of life itself, written in crescents and cycles, waxing and waning across millennia. For all our modern achievements, space travel, skyscrapers, artificial intelligence, we remain creatures of rhythm, creatures of light, and somewhere deep beneath the noise of civilization, our bodies still remember what the mind has forgotten, that we evolved, not alone, but in orbit, that the moon was never just scenery, it was a second parent, a co-sculptor of our evolution. Earth gave us matter, gravity, soil to stand on, but the moon gave us time, pattern, possibility. It shaped the tides that shaped the shorelines, that shaped the first steps onto land. It stabilized the planet so life could last long enough to become us. And all the while, it watched quietly, steadily, without fail. Perhaps we were never meant to be earthbound in the way we've imagined. Our story has always been bigger, a two-body tale, not one. Earth and moon, day and night, gravity and grace. One grounds us, the other guides us, and maybe that's why, when we look up at the moon, we feel something we can't quite name, a tug in the chest, a soft ache of recognition, not because the moon is mysterious, but because it's familiar, like a face we've always known, even if we forgot to remember why. Perhaps the reason we feel at home when we see the moon is because, somewhere deep in our bones, we still carry the truth that we have never been alone in the dark.